You're watching the Black Wonder Channel, where we discuss current events, geopolitics, and much more.
I'm announcing today that I'm running for President of the United States of America. Anybody watch The View on TV? I'm going on The View on Monday because I think it's time for a conservative with a backbone to look those ladies in the eyes and say, you do not have to be an exception to succeed in America. You can be the rule.
He came out and did that dog whistle, victimhood. As soon as you say that, you know what he's talking about.
It's so confusing to me because Tim Scott sitting there as obviously an exceptional person saying, I'm not the exception.
Yeah. I don't know who his message is supposed to resonate with. Actually, he's talking about victimhood and personal responsibility, and it just seems to me that the Republican Party has a real racism problem. I mean, and those aren't my words; those are the words of Michael Steele.
Bar is low, right? So when you've got there is Donald Trump, and Ron DeSantis, who's also going to announce this week, and they're both full of grievances and piss and vinegar. One is spreading conspiracy theories and lies and calling himself the Retribution. The other one is manufacturing culture wars against everything and everyone, to the point where the NAACP actually issued a travel advisory against going to Florida.
At this point, Tim Scott is only polling at 1.8%. Donald Trump is still the front runner at 56.3%.
Well, if it's not the government's fault, I don't have to do anything about it. It's innate, the natural state of some people to be less than, lower than other people.
I still think it's the government's fault.
To work less hard and be ignorant and da-da-da-da. And therefore, we should cut social programs. And what that ends up doing, because most people on social programs in the United States of America are actually white, most people on food stamps are white, it's a 75% white country or whatever it is, that is, black people are being used, as they have been for decades now, as an excuse to cut public policy, social policies, the social safety net, more broadly speaking. And so it really is an end run to undo the social safety net that a lot of poor and working class white people end up falling for, because, you know, there is this, they call it the wages of whiteness. They call it like you're told at least you're better than somebody.
He's adding that. I think one of the issues that Tim Scott has is that he seems to think because I made it, everyone can make it, ignoring, again, the fact that he is the exception and not the rule. And
I'm going on The View on Monday. On the right foot on that issue. It is 100%.
No.
Whoopi Goldberg scolded the View audience today for booing Republican presidential candidate Tim Scott.
Do not boo. This is The View. We accept we don't have to believe everything people say, but you cannot boo people here, please.
you have indicated that you don't believe in systemic racism. What is your definition of systemic racism?
Well, the fact of the matter is we've had an African-American president, African-American vice president. We've had 2 African-Americans to be secretaries of the state. In my home city, the police chief is an African-American who's now running for mayor.
And I listened to everything you said.
Yes.
And I wonder why these conversations don't seem to be held with Republicans. All of the exceptional stuff you're talking about. And one of the reasons we continue to have new exceptionalism is because every time folks make 40 steps forward, they get dragged 40 steps back. So how do we, you as a black man, but you yourself have talked about when the police stopped you.
Absolutely.
So how can you get your party to stop trying to stop the progression?
The issue of discrimination that I have faced, I assume you face as well, is an issue of the heart. It's not Republicans or Democrats. Frankly, both sides of the aisle can do a better job on the issue of race. And frankly, my side of the aisle, I think, is doing a fabulous job of making progress. The question is, how do we measure that progress?
How is that?
Well, let me just give you a couple examples. So when you think about, this is good.
And he had a very interesting conversation on The View about his belief that there is no such thing as systemic racism.
While I understand his point, what his thesis is not true. Now, for example, in the state of Maryland, we have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap, right? We don't have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap because one group worked 8 times harder. That's not what happened. You can't understand why there's a wealth gap unless you understand things like redlining, and where you had literally people being separated on where they were living and where they could live and where they could buy property, depending on their skin color.
Statistical reality that we can't even argue with is that African Americans are what, 14, 15% of this country?
13%.
And they're 3% of the U.S. Senate.
This nation is making measurable progress in real time. And if we focus on that and continue to make progress, we will fulfill the notion that this is the nation that can become more perfect. And what I am concerned
Not without
about
fixing the structures and the systemic racism that is embedded in
well,
this
the
country.
fact of the matter is that we don't have to agree. We don't have to agree on the.
Thank you for watching the Black Wonder channel. If you found value in our content, please like, subscribe, and share.